Hey there, welcome to episode 79 of the Social Business Engine podcast, the podcast where I invite leaders from brands across all industries who are excited to share with you, the modern business executive, how social media is used in their business strategy. I'm Bernie Borges, CEO of Find and Convert and your host of the Social Business Engine podcast. On this week's episode, I'm excited to be joined by Brian Jones. Brian is Vice President North America Commercial Marketing at Dell, where he's responsible for leading Dell's North American marketing organization end-to-end, spanning all lines of business from consumer to large commercial and public institutions, including healthcare, life science, and education verticals. Now, on this episode, we're announcing the availability of a new social business journal published in cooperation with Dell. In this journal, we're publishing original research that was commissioned by Dell and conducted with Carnegie Mellon Heinz College. This research provides an understanding of the pivotal role social media is playing in strengthening the bond between enterprise sales professionals and their customers. Brian and I will discuss key findings and insights in this original research that provides best practices and tips which are actionable in any enterprise. Now, this journal is available as an ungated download, meaning that there's no form to complete, and it's available at socialbusinessengine.com/Dell. Now, if you're mobile right now, don't worry, I'll mention this again later in the show. And of course, you can also find this journal at our website. Just navigate to the journals page and you'll find it there. And you can also get this journal delivered to your inbox if you're subscribed to our weekly podcast updates, which we deliver by email every Friday. And now, here's my interview with Brian Jones, Vice President, North America Commercial Marketing at Dell. Brian, welcome to the Social Business Engine podcast.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and talk with you about social selling.
All right. Well, Brian, let's begin if we could. You've got a really big job at Dell. So can you just take a minute to give my listeners a sense for the scope of your responsibility at Dell?
Yeah, so I have marketing responsibility for all of our accounts that are basically medium business and up, and then all the verticals from a B2B perspective. So education, healthcare, life science, state and local government, as well as our federal government activity, our corporate accounts, and our medium business accounts. Okay.
So, Brian, this new research report that was just published with Carnegie Mellon Heinz College, a pretty big endeavor. Can you comment on the motivation or the reasoning, if you will, to conduct original research on digital transformation and the impact of social media on the relationship between sales professionals and their customers?
Yeah, I think the biggest part for us is we know that social is a really important tool for building relationships with customers, and sales obviously is the tip of the spear in that relationship with our customers. And so being able to get sales connected socially to their customer set, I think is a mission critical piece. And so we got into the research with Ari at Carnegie Mellon really to focus on what are those best practices, where should we start, how do we optimize it, how do we get the most out of it, and that's what you'll find in the download.
Okay. So, Brian, what are some of the most surprising or compelling findings from the research?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was really an eye-opener for us is that 75% of the B2B buyers that are out there are influenced by information they find through social media. So really seeing the connection that people have to social and in informing their business decisions. A lot of people look at social as really not a B2B tool, and
right.
We see it as a huge opportunity to develop deeper, insightful relationships with our customers, and leveraging social tools is part of the marketing plan to be able to deliver against that.
So that 75% stat, you're saying that was one of the most compelling ones in the research report, Brian?
Yeah, we knew social played an important role. We didn't know it played such a large role.
Right.
And so many people, such a high percentage of people were influenced by social. But it kind of makes sense, right? The digital journey has radically changed how B2B educates themselves on opportunities and to solve their business problems. And so we knew social played a role. We just didn't know it played as large of a role.
Yeah. The other thing that makes sense to me as a practitioner and someone else on the agency side is that more and more companies are seeing their peers use social, and they themselves are using social even from a personal standpoint. So that bridge to getting information online as a B2B buyer is not a huge bridge as much as it was about 5 years ago.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think what we have really been focused on, and I think one of the things that first connected me with Ari and the work he was doing at Carnegie Mellon was this discussion that he and I had around this bidirectional flow of communication with sales. It's not a shout, right? You don't just blast information at people. Really, social gives you the opportunity to create that bidirectional communication and create authenticity in the relationship that you're developing. And I think there's a lot of goodness to that, because I think a big and critical piece for sales is moving out of just purely a sales capacity and more into a consultative capacity where they're helping solve business problems. And when we can get on the other side of the desk and be part of the organization that's helping solve business problems rather than just sell stuff, we're much more effective, and the relationship is much stronger.
Yeah. The point you make on that, Brian, is really intriguing to me, because the most successful sales professionals for decades have always been very helpful. But now the tools that they have available to them through social really take it up to a whole different level on how they can be helpful, just by the way that they engage online with both prospects and customers.
Yeah, people want to know that you're engaged in their business, right? They don't want to just see you when you're there to sell them something, when you have a new product or service. They want you engaged in their business. They want you to understand what your value prop is to them, but they really want somebody that comes alongside and is, again, helping solve business problems, not just selling stuff.
Yeah.
And we think social is a really critical tool to help enable that relationship.
Now, Brian, there were several industry experts that were invited to contribute their thoughts into the journal. Were there any one or two contributions that really impacted you?
Yeah, Brian Kramer was really instrumental in the conversation that we had and in creating the journal. And it goes back to that whole concept of being a consultative resource for your customer rather than just a salesperson. He calls it social helping, and I think you'll see that in there. It's getting the right information to the right people at the right time, and it is about that flow, right? And my background is sales, right? I'm a sales guy masquerading as a marketing leader, and at the end of the day, the real value that you have in sales and marketing is creating that relationship that's sustainable. And so the social helping concept from Brian Kramer, I think, really was something that was important that we get integrated in there, because I think it's a differentiator, and I think it's a unique perspective that adds a lot of value.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, that's actually a really good segue to this next topic that I want to discuss with you, Brian, and that's the topic of social credibility. It comes out in the report as it's an important role. So do you want to comment on the role of social credibility in modern enterprise sales?
Yeah, I mean, credibility is really the currency that a salesperson trades in, right? Their relationships and how they are positioned in helping solve business problems. Their credibility is really what they trade on in the relationship they have with their customer. So it's a huge part of it, and we cover some of this in the journal. But the biggest part of it is just really around establishing an authentic communication and a relationship based on authenticity. Social is a tool that, if it's used correctly, and again, we go into a lot of best practices in the journal. If you use it correctly, it's a way to nurture and develop a relationship that you may already have in new ways and to strengthen it. But if you use it the wrong way, you can create a credibility gap or damage your credibility fairly quickly, especially if you're just always in broadcast mode. You're not listening, right? It's again, going back to Ari's concept of bidirectional, right? That bidirectional piece is what makes it credible and what makes it valuable for our customer set. And so it is a really big part of it, and it's probably the linchpin to having the right social selling strategy.
Well, Brian, the subtitle of the journal, I mean, the title is Digital Transformation. The subtitle is Social Selling Research, Insights, and Best Practices. And one of the topics that I knew had to be in there is the role of content in social selling. So, do you want to just touch on what does the report say about the role of content in social selling?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that really stand out from the research. One is that relevant content at the right time is really important. It's not about the second concept would be it's not about velocity of content, right? It's about getting the right content into the right conversation at the right time. Again, from authentically, right? And so content is really important. But it's not about just a pure volume. What we found is creating higher volume and higher frequency doesn't necessarily add value. What adds value is having relevant content at relevant time. And so one of the things that I focus on with our organization is we don't put a lot of artificial constraints on the salespeople around how they interact socially. They need to do that in a natural way. Mm-hmm. If you put in a metric that says, hey, you need to post 7.62 pieces of content a week, they'll do it, right? But it won't be authentic. It probably won't be value add. And so what we really focused on in some of the best practices here was really having the right content at the right time with the right frequency.
And I really appreciated that the report goes into some detail about the buyer's journey and the importance of delivering content that's relevant to the buyer in the different stages of the buyer's journey, and also speaks to the different personas that are involved. So the report does a nice job of really outlining that so that the reader has a good understanding of how all those dots get connected and fit together.
Yeah, I think one of the other pieces that we found is you also, as a marketing organization or as a company, have to change your content strategy to fit the social environment, right? So you go back 4 or 5 years ago, a 5-page white paper on a highly technical solution set was pretty in vogue, right? And there's a lot of content that you could find out there that was super detailed. And what we found is what you really need to be able to do is split that 5 pages into 5 one-page content pieces and put that out there. People consume it more readily. People consume it more frequently, and it keeps that kind of always on, always bi-directional flow of information going. So it's a very different strategy than what people have traditionally thought of around content.
Yeah, and it makes it more shareable too.
Yeah.
Brian, what does the report say about the social media platforms that are used by B2B sales organizations? I was a little bit surprised by that.
Yeah, I think that one of the key thing that really stood out for us was the importance of Twitter, right? And that real-time, relevant conversation, engaging in that. Because, having now gone through the research, it makes total sense. But before we went into it and really looked at this, we kind of thought, well, where does Twitter fit in this, right? We know it fits, but how? It fits because it's about the relevant real-time interaction. And again, it's about not being an always-on broadcast, right? You need to be listening a lot, right? And Twitter gives you an opportunity to real time kind of understand what some of the key players in your company's organization, the sales or the customer's organization, what they're doing, what's important to them, why it's important to them, what business challenges are they trying to solve. And so, and then engaging through Twitter is a great way to help bring along conversations from customers, prospects, influencers. I think the influencer community that's in the Twitter space is really critical as well, to be engaged there. But I think that was probably the one that was most interesting. And obviously LinkedIn plays an important role.
Sure.
Facebook plays an important role as well, and we talk about that in the document. But really, Twitter was the one of the key things that we came away really trying to understand better how to fit that into our strategy.
Yeah, and the report also does a nice job, Brian, of pointing out some tools and how you can use tools in the use of Twitter, because I know for a lot of organizations, just kind of getting over the hurdle of getting into Twitter is a little bit overwhelming. So by just referencing some tools that, make it very realistic and practical, that was a real strong contribution to the relevance of Twitter. So I really appreciated that. I actually want to come back to something that I touched on earlier. We talked about it a little bit, but I want to come back to it, and that's the role of the customer decision journey. And I want to just ask you to elaborate on that a little bit. What is that role, and how do mature social selling teams approach and leverage their understanding of that decision journey?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, and you hit on the key pieces, the personas. So everyone has a different set of things that they're looking for. So for us in the technology space, but I think this is broadly applicable to business in general, for us in the technology space, the implementer is looking for a very certain specific set of information and interactions that can be significantly different than the executive that's responsible for the overall set of solutions or capabilities that they're delivering for their customer. And so the persona is really important. You need to be talking to the person in a relevant set of languages and in a dialogue that's relevant for their role and their responsibility. So the persona plays a really important role. The second piece is really that customer journey, right? And so there's several phases to it. So there, awareness, consideration, decision, implementation, advocacy. Any number of those phases requires a really specific set of strategies and content to come alongside that conversation. So if somebody is really in a discovery phase, you want to be helping educate them, right? You don't want to be dropping a bunch of technical detail on them or a bunch of implementation information. Right. They're not there yet, right? You need to come alongside that. It goes back to that whole bi-directional flow and that relationship building capability that social selling gives you, which is really coming alongside the person and talking to them in their language and in their value statements and what they're trying to get done, and coming along and understanding where they're at in those phases so that you're helping. Again, that social helping component from Brian Kramer. Right.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, so let's talk about the conclusive takeaway from this report from the point of view of social selling best practices. How would you kind of sum up the conclusive takeaway, Brian?
I think the key thing for us is that social selling has got to be part of your overall marketing plan. It's got to be part of a comprehensive strategy. It's not a strategy by itself, right? It's part of a marketing plan. It's got to be integrated into the plan, and integration is really important. It can't be a bolt-on. It can't be an afterthought. It needs to be woven into the marketing plan that you're building, and then it requires a wide range of cross-functional support to make the content available, to make the timing available, the right tool sets available, so that you're creating those relevant conversations and driving, to the desired outcomes.
Okay, great. And can you remark on how your marketing organization at Dell is undergoing a digital transformation? You kind of referenced that earlier in the conversation, but I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into that because I have some insight into it, and I'd like to share that with my listeners.
Yeah, so when we looked at this has been a long-term objective of mine, and it's been something I've been focused on for a couple of years. But to make social selling effective and make it work in the organization, I knew that we had to, as a marketing organization, take that social media journey first. We needed to really learn how, as an organization, to create a socially connected organization. How do you nurture it? How do you develop it? How do you take people that are on different parts of a social journey where you've got early adopters that you just need to help them accelerate what they're doing, all the way to the novice that's just dipping their toe into social media? How do you bring all that together? So 2 years ago, we undertook that from a marketing perspective for the entire organization. And what that was really designed to do is create that soft landing zone for the strategy that we're now taking forward into sales, and helping sales then become socially connected to their customers. So for us, it was, we needed to, again, to quote something you said earlier, we needed to eat our own dog food around a social strategy first, and then take those key learnings, the key information that we gleaned from our own experiences, and then pull that forward for sales to make it more effective for them. Because the sales capacity we have and the relationship we have with our customers is one of the most precious assets that we have in the company. So I wanted to be as prepared as possible for our social journey through sales, and so I knew that we needed to do that internally first.
And Brian, if you don't mind my asking, because I love the fact that you're calling it a journey. I use that word all the time in this context. Where are you on the journey? I mean, how far along are you on that journey?
So we actually have a lot of stuff off the ground right now. We've started with a social selling pilot that we are now expanding throughout the organization. So we've got a baseline of knowledge from the marketing organization, and then a baseline of knowledge from our early adopters in sales that we're now taking to the rest of the sales organization. I think one of the key things that we know that we're on the right path is we have sales organizations that are coming to us and saying, "Hey, I want to be part of this. I want to be added." We are being fairly cautious about how we add folks to make sure that we've got the right resources on our side to be able to support them and create the right cross-functional capability to deliver against it. So the demand is extremely high for us, and we're really looking to accelerate it at the beginning of next calendar year.
Outstanding. Well, I'm watching, and I want to report on it. All right. Well, Brian, I have this thing called my one thing question. And with every podcast, with every guest, I ask them one thing specifically. And in this case, what I'd like to ask you, Brian, is someone's just downloaded and read the journal, Digital Transformation, Social Selling Research, Insights, and Best Practices. What is one thing that any organization can take action on immediately after reading this journal?
So the one thing that I think you'll find in the research that we do with Carnegie and with the leading thinkers in the social selling environment right now is that really it's a journey, and it's all about building customer relationship. It's all about authenticity, and it's about a bi-directional flow of information. And so I think if you look at the best practices that are in here, you can take those best practices and immediately start to apply them to your organization, no matter what industry you're in.
Yeah. Totally agree. And I'm really glad that we're having this conversation here in 2015, because it's a little bit overdue. It's been this whole social selling, social business journey in itself has been a journey, and research like this report, Brian, that we have had the privilege of partnering with Dell on and with Carnegie on to bring this to market is really a privilege, because we get to share data and insights and best practices and real actionable information that any enterprise can act on. So, Brian, I want to thank you for joining me here today on the Social Business Engine podcast, for sharing this. Any closing thoughts?
No, I think it's great. I think, I would like to, again, thank Professor Lightman and the folks at Carnegie for the work that we were able to do with them. Brian Kramer was a big help in helping pull together some of the thoughts and strategies, and especially around content and those pieces. And then the work that we've been able to do with folks at the Social Business Engine to really bring this thing to light. So we're excited about the opportunity to share the research and the best practices, and we think there's a tremendous amount of value to the market in getting this concept really codified and moved forward and out of kind of, I think, a lot of folks' aspirational areas and into practical, pragmatic implementation.
Terrific. Thank you, Brian. Well, as I mentioned in the introduction, I am honored and excited to announce the availability of this new social business journal in cooperation with Dell that features original research commissioned by Dell and conducted with Carnegie Mellon Heinz College. And the research report is titled Digital Transformation, Social Selling Research, Insights, and Best Practices. And as we heard from Brian Jones, this research provides an understanding of the pivotal role that social media is playing in strengthening the bond between enterprise sales professionals and their customers. Remember, you can download this ungated research report, which means there's no form to fill out, by just going to either the journals page on our website, socialbusinessengine.com, or you can just go straight to it at socialbusinessengine.com/Dell. Now, if you're already subscribed by email to get our weekly podcast updates, which we send every Friday, then you're going to receive this journal delivered to your inbox. And if you're not subscribed to our weekly updates or you're not sure, just visit our subscribe page at our website. And of course, that is mobile friendly. Now, if you're a regular listener to the Social Business Engine podcast, please consider writing a review in iTunes. You can just go to socialbusinessengine.com/iTunes, where we've got a link directly to the podcast. And of course, I want to invite you to follow us on Twitter at SB Engine and engage with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com, you guessed it, /Social Business Engine. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I once again want to thank my guest, Brian Jones, Vice President, North America Commercial Marketing at Dell. This is Bernie Borges of Find and Convert and host of the Social Business Engine podcast, wishing you continued success on your social business journey.